Save the Semantics, episode 352. It is November 8th, 2025. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit, recording this on a Saturday evening. As the days get darker, so this is past post, daylight savings? What is it, the reversal of daylight savings? I don't know what to call it exactly, but so it gets darker and darker earlier on over here. So I try my best because I do tend to like recording out and about. Try to do it a little earlier when I can, but it is already getting darker. And it's around like 5 or so. So, can't stay out for too much longer, but just wanted to hop on, catch up on some basketball, also touch a little bit on Kirby Air Riders, because there's been a bigger update, and so I'll touch upon that, talk a little bit about Trails in the Sky as I kind of started that back up last night, maybe, speak on kind of the experiences there, so let's catch up on this week overall, because I haven't really recorded anything during the week necessarily. So let's talk some hoops. Warriors have it's been an up and down kind of past couple of weeks for them, as I sort of talked about previously. So Steph's been out for the last 2 games, the game in Sacramento and then last night when they played against the Nuggets. The thing that's a little disconcerting about last night's game was, everybody else played except for maybe Al Horford. Maybe there's some lingering injury concern with him, which is understandable, but we do need all of the firepower that we can get. So Jimmy and Draymond played. I think I wasn't really expecting too strong of a performance. I was hoping that they could put up a bit of a fight, but one of the things, and maybe it's a bit of an extrapolation because it is just one game without Steph, but the hope is that trend doesn't really continue, right? Where players are not able to step up in Steph's absence. Like, that feels like it's going back to the pre-Jimmy part of the season last year, which I think is a little... I would like to avoid being a part of that. Right now, the Warriors are at 500, which feels about right. If they can kind of, cobble together some wins despite some of these injuries, I think they could stay afloat for the most part, because they're not the only team that's struggling right now, so it's not like a unique situation to be in. I mean, you got like the Clippers, who are not doing super well right now. I think they're sort of like in the same ballpark in terms of like, the older team that isn't looking that great right now, but as the season goes along, they'll start to kind of find, the things that click. I feel like that's been the case for the Clippers for like the last 3 seasons now. And I think the Warriors will probably sort of follow suit in that regard. But yeah, I'm not... I think, again, the concerning thing is whether these trends right now will kind of hold and will continue. I think in the Sacramento game, the younger players, especially Will Richard, who has become one of my favorite rotational players over the course of this early part of the season, if you have players like him continuing to contribute in the way that he does, I think that he can be a pretty big part of the rotation moving forward. I think he can slot in to, kind of in a similar position to, like a Moses Moody, GP2 is really not, he's really doesn't have the same abilities anymore, unfortunately. Defensively, he's had a lot of lapses. I think it feels like he tends to make more mistakes than he usually does, right? Because there are on occasion, like every game, there's always at least in the past, there's been at least one sort of like head scratching, maybe turnover, unforced error on his end, but we're seeing a lot more of that now, which I think makes a lot of sense considering, he's getting older as well. So if you can have someone like Will Richards sort of slot into that role, everything he's done has been good, right? I just feel every time that I watch him, at least just from an eye test sort of view, he's making the right plays. He's in position for an offensive rebound and putback. He always is doing the right thing. It feels like, I don't know. I just, and maybe I'm not attunedly watching every single possession that he's a part of, but every time he's on the floor, he makes some kind of impact, and it really feels as though he is this complementary winning player that the Warriors really need at this point, right? And I think that he can, his performance in Sacramento was definitely impressive, scoring 30 plus points in his rookie starting debut. I think that's a really great sign. And I didn't know too much of his background until he came to the Warriors, but he was part of the championship team, the NCAA championship team that won last year, the Florida team. So I think that does contribute in a way too. And looking at his stats over his college career, it's nothing impressive, right? But I think just based on what he's able to provide, it just seems that he understands what it means to be a winning player. He understands, what he has to do in case, maybe some of the other players on his team are not contributing in the way that they maybe should. It just feels he is this kind of perfect fit for this team, and I think the front office really nailed this one. It just is. I have this sense of confidence when he's on the floor, right? Whereas someone, I'm not trying to put down anybody, but again, GP2 has lost a little bit of his, lost a little bit of that springiness, that sort of defensive identity that he's been so well known for. Podziemski has had, he's just fairly inconsistent in a lot of ways. When he does well, you love what he's able to do, but when he's not scoring and when he's not shooting well, it feels he's pretty ineffective if you keep him on the floor. So in contrast to that, someone like Will Richard, who understands his role incredibly well, is the perfect fit for this team. And so far, out of everything, he's been one of my sort of favorite storylines over the course of this early part of the season. Of course, he's going to have hiccups, during the season. Of course, he's going to make mistakes. He's still a rookie. He's an older rookie, but he's still a rookie, right? And so, but really, I've just been so impressed with what he's been able to do so far. And he's been really kind of the real bright spot of this team, amongst all of the inconsistencies with some of the other players and the injuries. Al Horford has really not done much so far. I have some concerns about his health and his viability moving forward. I just don't know how much he's going to be able to contribute, especially if he's not playing back-to-backs. And if he's not playing at a consistent rate, how viable is that going to be, and how reliable is that going to be in the future, right? I had some thoughts about how he should be maybe the starting center, but just based on his play, and he looks incredibly slow at this point. of his career. I understand why Kerr has sort of gone with him, coming off the bench in a lot of the games, right? So that's something to keep an eye on. I just don't know. It hasn't really looked great so far. It really feels like this might be his last year or so. I don't know what he intends to do next season, but that's something else too. I guess, see how that goes in the future. But right now, it's a little bit of a head scratch. I don't know how well that's going to work out, at least in this season. And yeah, outside of that, Jimmy has had his moments, I feel, but I guess outside of maybe the first few games or maybe the first week of games, it doesn't feel like he's had too much of an impact. And this just might be the case of him coasting during the regular season, which he has done during his time in Miami, right? So I don't know if that's all too surprising. The issue is he's not in the East, right? We're in the West. The competition is very different from what it would be, right? So that's something I don't know. I don't know how well you can really coast. Maybe that sounds a little contradicting based on what I'm saying in terms of them and the Clippers sort of picking up speed towards the end of the season. The issue is these losses earlier on are going to have an effect, right? As I've talked about over and over again. But if you want to kind of count on the longevity of these older players, I think you kind of have to take that measure in terms of, not going so hard at the beginning, right? You have to sort of pace yourself. And I think that feels like the mentality right now. I think getting those earlier wins in the beginning of the season when we were 5-1 or 4-1 or something like that was good, but I think just taking into consideration injuries, Steph was out last night with like a sickness or something, and hopefully he's able to overcome that soon. But the age thing is a real factor, and I think that they understand that. They understand that if they want to be able to get into the playoffs, they have to kind of preserve their bodies and preserve that energy to kind of ramp up, right? Which I don't know. It's a little bit of a contradiction based on what I've said in terms of needing to get as many wins as possible. I think that's going to continue to be this maybe butting heads thing of how much of that you want to compromise, right? How many games are you willing to let go in order for the players to have the energy to get into the postseason, right? Because I don't think it's going to be easy. I think they want to... I would love for them to avoid the play-in altogether, similar to last year, right? Again, it worked out, but an extra game is still an extra game. An extra game could be 2 extra games if they lose the first play-in game. So I just have, it's something to just kind of monitor as we sort of move forward. Again, really early. I think I have a sense of what they're trying to do. But it's, I don't know. It's just something to kind of keep an eye on and see, how effective that's going to be, being able to kind of maintain and preserve the older players, and then sort of, hoping that these younger players can kind of hit and sort of, step in the absence of Steph, Draymond, Jimmy when they're out, right? So that's kind of where things are. I'm not like panicking yet. It's too early to do that. I think once we're like halfway through the season and we're below 500, that's when we'll have to start having some conversations, kind of similar to what it looked like last year, right? Halfway through the season last year was kind of a disaster. It was not looking great until the Jimmy trade. So hopefully we can kind of avoid that scenario. I feel like with the personnel and the players that they have, they should be able to put themselves in a better position of at least, competing in the playoffs and competing for a playoff position. But again, I think the halfway point is kind of when you can sort of make some evaluations and see what's working or not, see if it's worthwhile to move someone like Kuminga to get another piece, right? Another thing is also the fact that DeAnthony Melton hasn't played yet, right? He could be a big contributing factor. I don't know how well he's going to play following his injury. That's going to be another thing where they're probably going to slow roll the process. So that's I do think that he'll be a nice additional piece, but how much is he going to really be able to contribute? We will see, right? So that's a potential factor, right? But also a bit of a question mark. Seth Curry, is he going to have any rotation time on this team with the emergence of Will Richard, Moody? How many? Considering that Seth is not really known as a consistent defender, how well he's going to fit into it. I mean, they already have like a shooter in the form of Buddy Hield. I guess having two can't hurt necessarily, but I just don't know how much rotation time he would get in this scenario regardless, right? It might help to have like another ball handler, but again, I just don't know. Similar to like DeAnthony Melton, there is like a bit of a question mark with him as well. How much is he going to be able to contribute at this point of time in his career? He might be decent, but I also don't know if he's going to get significant time, considering there is already a bit of a logjam at the guard position. Let's talk about some other teams. So the Bulls have continued to look really, really fun. They've had a couple of losses now, which have been like, okay, maybe they're sort of coming back to earth. Their loss against Milwaukee yesterday was just Giannis absolutely powering through, almost having a 40-point triple-double, which is pretty crazy. Bucks look pretty good right now. Understandably, that kind of coincides with how well Giannis is playing, right? It feels like he could be kind of an early MVP, part of the MVP conversation earlier in this season. But yeah, the Bulls, I think there's definitely some issues, especially when you have someone like Vucevic in the paint as sort of the primary paint protector, the center. While he has been pretty good on the offensive side of the ball, there has not been, there are no questions about his, lack of defensive, presence on the other end. And that was something that the Bucks just took advantage of it and exploited during yesterday's game. So, that I guess that's like a thing where looking at the early success of the Bulls, my concern is that they would just continue to hold on to Vucevic because of, the fact that he can stretch the floor and the fact that he is a pretty consistent offensive threat. However, when you're giving up a lot of points on the other side of the ball, how much of that is, kind of like a net benefit to have him on the floor, right? Is it worthwhile to keep him out there if he's giving up all of these points near the basket? I think is something to keep an eye on. I just don't know with this Bulls front office, knowing them and kind of knowing just their history of not trading pieces when they should have and holding on to them for far too long. I think my concern is that it's going to kind of continue to be that way, as long as this Bulls team is sort of going to be maybe in the middle of the pack, especially in this weaker Eastern Conference, right? I think the Bulls have this potential to be clear in the playoffs if they continue to sort of play the way that they do. The issue is, I don't know how, is keeping Vucevic worth it when you could get off of his contract, maybe get some younger pieces, and while that might make your team a little worse in the short run, now you do have some assets that you can play with and move around to I don't know, to try to open up some roster space so that you can go and get maybe one of those bigger franchise players that you could pair with like a Josh Giddey, right? So that's something to keep an eye on. I think it's always going to be a bit of a concern with this front office, the fact that front office / ownership group, the fact that they've just been in this middling position for so long. And while, I really have enjoyed watching this team, I think those concerns still remain from over these years. And I think it's just something that you have to kind of keep an eye on moving forward. The Pistons have looked pretty impressive so far. Every time I turn they were one of the teams that I had sort of, coming into this year. I had some concerns because they lost some significant pieces in a Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway, and Dennis Schroeder. And so I was a little worried that, that veteran presence, which was so evident, especially during that first round of the playoffs, they were, and then, just their overall success last year was sort of, was hinged on their, just their contributions. I was a little concerned that in their absence, this younger Detroit team was going to have some issues. But so far, they've looked really impressive. Outside of that first game against Chicago, they've looked really good. Cade has been dominant, averaging what feels like a 30-point triple-double. He's had a couple of instances where he went for 19 points in the fourth quarter, just kind of, putting the team on his shoulders when they need him to. Just a really impressive performance so far by the Pistons. I think that they've, the combo with Cade and Duren has looked really impressive. They just have this, they're just playing on a string on the offensive end. And then you're getting some really solid contributions from players like Asar Thompson, Isaiah Stewart, Ron Holland. So all of the young guys, I guess Stewart he's in his mid-20s now, but the rest of the younger players have really significantly improved this season and have been very impressive so far. And they have a clear identity. They're just, it's just hard-nosed, get to the paint. They don't have the best three-point shooters. They have Duncan Robinson, who kind of has been solid for them, but their identity is very much centered around Cade and Duren, Stewart, Holland, just these players that just play super hard and incredibly tough, and they're all pretty, they're all big players too, right? Like Cade is 6'8", he's a 6'8" point guard, so they play big, they play hard, they're just tough. They're a tough team, and I think they've really wore that identity on their sleeve, and that's kind of resulted in the success that they've had so far. Every time I've watched them, whether it was against, I guess the Nets yesterday, which is not really too surprising considering how poor the Nets are right now, but still, they were just dogging them. How they played against some of the other teams as well. I don't remember exactly, but they've won against the teams that they should, and they look good. And I think that type of style, I think, is translatable to long-term success, I think, right? When you have a certain identity, when you have a certain style, you look to teams like Indiana or, OKC especially, where there's this clear, this is how we're going to play the game. and this is how we're going to win these games. I think it's a really, it's not exactly the most tangible necessarily, but you get a sense of that. It's just kind of this feeling you get when you watch certain teams, right? You could point that to the Blazers as well. The Blazers, the way they play is very clear on just having this sort of identity of just being this long, lanky defensive team, just having a bunch of wings just kind of running around in like a Tumani Kamara. And then you got Drew Holiday now at sort of the point of attack is a huge part of their ability to have that kind of success. So I do think that having that sort of, sort of front-facing identity of sorts, I think is huge for lending itself to, a team's success. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. I just think that it's pretty impressive when you see that kind of play, when you see some teams sort of taking on a certain type of identity, and it's sort of leading to just like a type of success. And I think that's really fun to watch. I think the last sort of the last shift that we saw, especially last year in terms of like how things kind of worked out in the favor of some other teams, is like the Rockets, right? You got this like huge team with like, a bunch of 7-footers roaming the paint, really just kind of mucking up the defensive end. They kind of leaned into that, especially watching the first game of the season when they played against OKC, where they started what felt like four 7-footers with KD at the shooting guard, and then you got Amen Thompson as point guard. Like that type of thing where, you're just trying something out and seeing if it sticks. I think it's fun to watch, right? The Rockets aren't necessarily my favorite team, and I haven't watched a ton of them outside of that opening night game. But I think that when you have something, when you're really trying something and you have the personnel that can support that, I think it's fun to watch, and it makes for some enjoyable basketball play, and it makes for something interesting that you can kind of something interesting to analyze as on a bit more of like a deeper level, right? Like you get the surface level sort of like myself who's making a bit more of like a surface level observation, and then you can kind of dig a little deeper into that and see why it is that works, right? Like why these certain schematics and why these certain lineups work out is because of, a combination of the coaching, the roster, and buying into that type of style of play. And I think all of those things combined, you get this result on the court. And so I just think that it's sort of interesting to point out, teams that are successful in certain ways because of how they approach the game. And then you could on the flip side, you could also look to teams that there's like not a clear, I think the most obvious example is the Kings. I have no idea what that team is, right? It feels like an absolute mess. They have Russ kind of running the show right now as Sabonis and some other players are out. And he's looked good for his age, but is the team's identity centered around Russell Westbrook? No, right? Are they a defensive-minded team? Are they an offensively-minded team? I have no idea what they are. And I think that's kind of the problem, right? The Bulls, they're the run and gun team, and that's a lot of fun, right? Similar to the Pacers last year. So you get that even with the teams that aren't the best, you understand what the style that they're trying to play. I have no idea. Watching the Kings when they played against the Warriors, I have no idea what they were trying to do. Like, it was just this mess. It was just this hodgepodge of just older players. They have one of the oldest rosters in the team outside of the Clippers and the Warriors, and they are one of the worst teams, right? It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. and it's going to continue to be a mess as long as that owner is in place there. I think a lot of people get what I mean. This is just, it's not good. I don't know what they're doing. They just need to blow it up. They actually need to blow it up. I understand it sucks. I understand it sucks restarting, but you're going to be bad regardless. So just pull the trigger, tank, try our best to get a high draft lottery or high lottery pick, and then kind of move on forward from there. Right. So yeah, I just feel for Sacramento fans right now, because it's tough. It's tough watching this team, even if watching Russ play his ass off with this incredibly bad team might be kind of fun. It just feels like you're stuck in nowhere land right now, and that's it's not a great place to be. Anyways, that's it for NBA talk. I'll talk a little bit briefly about so Kirby Air Riders. They're having sort of a global test right now, and I played a little bit of it last night, and man, the nostalgia I got when I heard the city trial theme is indescribable. Playing a Kirby Air Ride game in 2025 is such a wild feeling, because this game, the original game on the GameCube was such a, I don't know, it feels like almost a core memory playing that, because I just played City Trial so much. Just not even just by myself against the 3 other CPU players and having an absolute blast, just going over and over again. And then this time around, it's multiplayer, right? And it's absolute chaos based on the one match that I played. And I'm so excited. And then on top of that, you got these other modes, the what is it? I forgot, the road trip mode, where it's kind of similar to maybe like a smash run, or as I mentioned, a Space Emissary from Brawl. Those a very Sakurai kind of gameplay mode. It feels like there's so much, and there's this room that you can kind of customize things as well. It feels like a dream. It feels like a dream game, and I can't wait to pick it up either later this month or later this year. We'll see. But it looks great. I don't know how long the global but I think there's multiple days that are happening. I think it's actually going on at this moment. So once I finish recording, I'll probably play a little bit more of that. I mean, it just feels, I mean, I can't wait to talk about it more as I delve deeper into it. Once I, get the full game and everything. So I also played a little bit of Trails in the Sky last night, maybe just an hour or so. It feels good. It feels good to be back in this world. It's nice just kind of, the thing about this game in particular is that the story isn't super crazy yet, right? It's not all that convoluted, at least at this point in the game. So it felt good just being able to kind of ease back into it. I'm excited to kind of see, where the story leads. It's just fun. It's fun being challenged on certain battles as well. Just kind of trying out different strategies and stuff like that. Right now, the difficulty I'm playing at is sort of like a normal difficulty, but I have had some moments where I've game overed, and just having to kind of shift some of the strategy and shift some of the things that some of the character actions and stuff like that adds a little bit of adds a little bit more flavor to the battle system, which I love. I mean, the battle system is super fun. It's super flashy and it just clicks. So I've been, it's been fun to kind of jump back into that. And I can't wait to kind of continue, going through the stories, uncovering things. I think Estelle is just such a she's the perfect protagonist for this type of game. Just incredibly bright and just lighthearted, but also being able to kind of tap into her emotions and relate to her brother Joshua. I really like their relationship. I really like, she's she's she can be a bit like, she's just very just outgoing and fun, and she's so expressive, but she also has a really good understanding of people's emotions, and I think she's a great character so far, and I'm really, I think she's just like a perfect kind of, for just this fun adventure game, right? I just think she's just like the perfect protagonist for this. But yeah, anyways, bit of a short one right now. I don't know if I'm gonna record tomorrow or Monday. I think I'll just post this either later tonight or, sometime maybe Sunday. But next time I record will probably be on Monday, talking about some of the games over this weekend. Yeah, that's gonna do it for now. Thanks for listening. As always, this has been Save the Semantics, signing off.